Let's talk about the Steam Deck too. Yes, again, leaks, rumors, speculation, they're all back. But this time, things feel a bit off. And I mean that seriously. The information flying around is making big claims, huge ones. And the more you look into them, the more you start to wonder, is any of it real? Or are we just building castles out of thin air? Now, I want to be very clear right from the start. This video isn't just about the Steam Deck to itself. It's about the way this story has been reported. The way certain leaks have been stretched, twisted, and spun into something they're not. So, if you've seen all these headlines saying the Steam Deck 2 is coming with some new super powerful AMD chip, maybe even the same chip that could power the PlayStation 6, well, buckle up, because we need to rewind a bit and really dig. The source of all this? A YouTube podcast episode. That's right, not an official Valve press release, not some leaked roadmap, just two guys chatting on a podcast. That podcast is called Broken Silicon. Hosted by Tom from the channel Moore's Law is Dead. He invited Jimmy Champagne, who runs Deck Ready and PS Ready, to talk about future gaming devices. They spoke about what might be coming in the next generation of handhelds, including a potential Steam Deck 2. Let me say this again. They were speculating. That's all. They were sharing opinions, wishes, ideas. They weren't saying this is happening, but if you read certain articles online, you'd think they dropped official specs and insider info from Valve itself. That's the problem. Somewhere between the podcast and the headlines, everything got distorted. Let's start with the first claim that spread like wildfire. Apparently, Valve is working on a next-gen Steam Deck that's going to be significantly more powerful. Sounds exciting, right? But here's the thing. We already knew that. Of course, the Steam Deck 2 is going to be more powerful than the original. Every new generation of hardware is supposed to be better. That's not news. That's just logic. If you actually listen to the podcast, Tom and Jimmy talk about this in a very casual way. They treat the Steam Deck 2 as something that will eventually happen, which, again, is reasonable. Valve has already said they want to make a successor. But there's no quote in that episode where Tom says he's seen internal documents from Valve or heard from inside sources that the Steam Deck 2 is already in development. Nothing like that. Still, a website called notebookcheck.net ran with the story. They wrote an article suggesting that internal leaks show Valve is working on this powerful new Steam Deck. Then other sites, Tom's Guide, PC Guide, Kotaku, picked up NotebookCheck's article and just ran with it. Nobody double-checked the original source. Nobody quoted the podcast directly. And because NotebookCheck made one mistake spelling Jimmy's name wrong, every other site repeated that mistake too, which shows they all just copied each other. Rather than listening to what was actually said, let's pause for a second and talk about that. If you're going to report on something, especially a leak, the least you can do is listen to the source. Check the facts. Provide a timestamp. Otherwise, what are you really doing? You're spreading misinformation. Maybe not on purpose, but the damage is still done. Because now, thousands of people believe Valve is working on some next-gen console, powered by a mystery chip, all because a few websites got a little too excited now about that chip. Another part of the leak that caught attention is something called Magnus. This is supposedly a new AMD chip based on Zen 6. The story going around is that Valve's new device, maybe the Steam Deck 2, maybe a home console, could be using this chip. And not just Valve, but Sony or Microsoft too. Yes, people are saying this could power the PS6 or the next Xbox. Sounds wild, right? But again, this isn't what was said in the podcast. Not exactly. What actually happened is that Tom briefly mentioned Magnus. He said he had leaked its existence in an earlier video. He said it's a powerful chip, probably designed for gaming hardware. And he mentioned that it might be for the PS6 or the next Xbox, or maybe even something Valve is working on. But that's all. He didn't confirm anything. He didn't say. Valve is definitely using this chip. He just threw it out there as a possibility. One of several. And there's a big difference between this might happen and this is happening. But the news articles ignored that. They presented it as fact. That's where things really started spiraling. People read these headlines and assumed Valve has a deal with AMD to use Magnus in the Steam Deck 2. Or even worse, that Valve and Sony are working together somehow. That's just not supported by the podcast at all. Let me give you a real example. At one point in the podcast, Tom says, if they made a Steam Deck built for what's in the Ally X right now, I think any game you're running at 40 frames is now 120. He's talking about the idea that if Valve used more powerful off-the-shelf parts, like what's in the Asus ROG Ally, they could boost performance significantly. That's a big if. And it's not a leak. It's just an opinion. Later in the episode, Tom does talk about a Steam home console. That's not the Steam Deck 2. It's something entirely different. He mentions that he heard Valve might be working on something powerful, and that they might treat it like a proper console launch. But even then, he doesn't say where that information came from. No names, no documents, just a general comment. And to be honest, a Steam home console is not something Valve has ever confirmed. If it's real, we don't know anything about it yet. Not officially. Tom also says that Magnus isn't meant for desktops or laptops. So, it's probably for consoles. He suggests that it's most likely for Sony or Microsoft. Valve is more of a maybe. That's a pretty big detail to ignore when you're writing an article. But it didn't stop these sites from jumping straight to Magnus is going in the Steam Deck 2. Again, no real proof. Just a lot of guesswork being passed off as truth. And here's something else. After all this blew up, Tom actually commented on his own video. He pinned a comment saying that Magnus is definitely going to be used in the next-gen Xbox based on his sources. Not the Steam Deck, not Valve, Xbox. That's a direct correction, but none of the websites updated their articles to reflect that. They just left the false claims up. Now, let's be fair here. Leaks are messy. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they're just misinterpreted. But in this case, it feels like the problem isn't the leak itself, it's how it was reported. If you take a relaxed conversation between two gaming enthusiasts and turn it into headline news without any fact-checking, that's not journalism. That's rumor-mongering. And honestly, it's disrespectful to the people who are actually trying. To have thoughtful discussions, Tom and Jimmy weren't pretending to be insiders. They weren't trying to fool anyone. They were just sharing their thoughts. But because people want news, especially about something as hyped as the Steam Deck, 2. Those thoughts got twisted into something they were never meant to be. Let's talk for a second about the Steam Deck 2 itself. What do we actually know? Very little. Valve has said they want to make one, but they've also said they're not in a rush. They'll wait until the right tech is available at the right price. That makes sense. The original Steam Deck is still selling well, it's still relevant. There's no reason for Valve to rush a sequel, especially if it means cutting corners or pushing unproven hardware. From a business perspective, it's smarter to wait. Let AMD and other chip makers refine their next-gen platforms. Let the manufacturing costs come down. Then, when everything is ready, launch a device that blows people away. That's how you do it. Not by rushing out a device just to chase headlines. Valve has also been improving Steam's. That's their custom operating system for the Steam Deck. It's still in development, still being refined. And if they're going to release a more powerful Steam Deck 2, they'll want to make sure the software is rock solid. So again, patience makes sense. Look, I get it. People are excited. The Steam Deck changed the handheld gaming market. It proved that powerful PC-style handhelds can work. So of course, we're eager for the next big thing. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's not treat speculation as fact, because that only leads to disappointment later. When the Steam Deck 2 does come, it will be a big moment. But until Valve makes an official announcement, everything else is just talk. Enjoy the talk, sure. Debate it, speculate. But don't let it turn into misinformation. And don't let websites get away with reporting guesses as if they're gospel. So that's where we are. A podcast conversation got blown out of proportion. A bunch of websites copied each other. And now we're left trying to sort truth from fiction. It's frustrating. But it's also a reminder, always check the source. Always listen carefully. And maybe most importantly, don't believe everything you read.